And so I'm very excited to introduce our speaker today, Howard Frost, who is a member of our church for many years. And as I've over the years gotten to know Howard, I've been impressed more and more with his detailed, meticulous attention to detail and his leadership in many, many areas. Now I asked him for a little bit about his background. I'm going to just share briefly with you. He has 35 years as a defense analyst for Russia, Europe, and Iran. So that's pretty relevant to today's world, right? So he's working for a U.S. government media center now as a practical scientist in countries involved with work for National Presbyterian Church, for our missions and our outreach, for countries like in the Balkans, in Russia, Armenia, Germany, Iraq, and Moldova. And he's been sending delegations to Moldova and some of these countries to do counseling on family life and help some of these people to learn something about Christian values as they apply to practical life. So I'm honored and impressed with Howard's willingness to come and share with us. Today he's going to be talking particularly about Croatia. Remember the story about the Balkan Civil War there about 20 years ago? What's happening now in countries like Croatia? And then you all will have a chance to ask some questions at the end. So Howard, thank you again for coming.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, thanks for getting the lights. I appreciate that. I'm going to move this way because I know you guys can't see the screen.
I think we're signed.
I think it was there you go. Wonderful. And so you guys, excuse me, can you guys see the screen as well, or does this thing get light? It's all right. Okay, great. So I told Paul that I would use as a sort of introductory verse a section of the Beatitudes.
You want to move the mic closer to you?
Oh, yeah, right, because I need to, we're recording. Thanks very much. Good reminder.
I spent 15 minutes arranging all this stuff.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. So first of all, I wanted to before I get into my Bible verse, I wanted to thank you guys for the invitation to come talk to us. It's always an honor to do that. And it's not often that I get introduced by someone who's excited to hear me. So I hope to live up to that expectation. Paul's very gracious to do that. It's my pleasure to be here and have the opportunity to talk with you. I shared with Paul by email. There's a section of the Beatitudes that I wanted to sort of use as a sort of theme verse, if you will. So Jesus is talking. He says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." So when we think about how to apply God's word to God's world, this question about what does it mean to be pure in heart and what does it mean to be peacemakers is a key issue for the Balkans. I'll share with you some particular thoughts about that a bit later on, but let me just share with you about the trip that I and Jim Sover, who is a former member here at National and was a candidate for ministry through National. Can we get the lights? Okay, thanks. So this is the newest part of the school. I'll call it ETS, the Evangelical Theological Seminary, and its main leader for the past several decades, Peter Kuzmich. So here's a map to sort of show you where this is. Croatia is a sort of a U-shaped country, and Osijek, which is where the seminary is right there. And there were some discussions about where to put the seminary, where to locate the seminary back in the 70s when it was established. People were thinking, well, should we put it in Zagreb, the capital there, or someplace else? And they decided to put it in Osijek because it has a very close. It's very close geographically to Hungary, to Serbia, to Bosnia and Herzegovina. So it was a pretty centrally located spot for ministry activities, because the school over the decades has taken students from all around Eastern Europe. Most will come from these days come from Croatia and Bosnia, but they've attracted students from all around, and being in OSIAC was a good place geographically to be. So there were about 4 or 5 things that Jim and I did while we were there. OSIAC, the seminary, has about 100,000 volumes in its library, which is probably the largest Protestant seminary in Eastern Europe. It's just a library is a huge resource, and you know, if you have money, you can go buy teachers, you can buy professors, but you really can't buy a library easily. So this is a huge resource that and benefit of the school for Central and Eastern Europe, and also one of the reasons that NPC has been supporting it since the middle 90s. About a year or so ago, some nice person donated about 25,000 books to the school, and you know, the school doesn't have a really big staff, and so they just sort of working through the accessioning of these books. So Jim and I were doing that. You know, NBC has also donated books to the library from its own library, that are books that are not needed. So in the library, you can see a few books here and there that are from NPC. So helping in the library was one of the things that we did. We also did ESOL, English for Speakers of Second Language. English for speakers of other languages, right? And so we were working with the students there, doing exercises and that sort of thing. This is a class that's normally run by one of the teachers who wanted to take a bit of a break, so she used our visit there to do that. So the English language ability of the students is pretty good. And indeed, most of the classes, actually maybe even all the classes, except for an occasional exception, are in English. So they have to have a pretty good ability in English when they come. Now, one thing I might mention, this is for a little footnote for you guys, is that when you are going to an evangelical seminary, I would say maybe 2/3 of the books that you're going to read are going to be in English. I mean, there are evangelicals that write in German or French, occasionally in Hungarian, and you can find some of those books in the library. But the vast majority of literature that's out for seminaries too is in English. So it behooves, it's necessary for these students to have a good command of English when they come. So the school makes it possible for these students to continue to work on it. So they have a chapel service, and so Jim and I were preaching and singing for the chapel service. One of the things that we do when we go over to ETS is to help some of the local churches where some of the seminary graduates are pastors. So we did that on several days, on Sundays and also during the weekday. This guy is a Pentecostal pastor who's not actually a seminary graduate, but his daughter is married to one of the professors, and so he's a good friend of the school. This guy is really interesting. He and his church had a vision 3 or 4 years ago to establish a senior citizens home co-located with the church. So they began doing that, and you know, the way things go, the way construction goes in Eastern Europe and Russia is that you build a little bit, collect some more money, build a bit more, and collect some more money, and that sort of thing. So it had been about a 5 or 6 year project. We actually, some of the members of our team, the last time we went, which was in 2011, contributed to this building, and so they've now have fitted out the rooms and such. This is the rooms of one of the senior citizens that's there, and although the church is Pentecostal, they open this facility to anyone who would like to come. So anyway, so we talk to the congregation to try to encourage them in their walk in their faith walk and that sort of thing. This is another church, the church that I went to in Bailey Monastery. It's a little suburb not far from Osea. The church has an economic challenge because it exists. It's sort of been refurbished in an area where which was heavily affected by the war. So you saw from the map how far east Osijek was. So a whole lot of that territory was taken over by the Serbs in 1990 when they invaded, and the economic sort of infrastructure and abilities and capacities was destroyed in much of eastern Croatia. So, and a lot of it hasn't been rebuilt much. The government has helped fix the buildings back up, but the people and the communities are still struggling. So this pastor, the guy on the far right, is there sort of as a volunteer pastor. He was transferred by his own preference from another church and to try to help these people sort of get past the war, get past their the concerns they have or ethnic differences and that sort of thing. So it's a real challenge. And one of the main challenges, and we'll come back to this later in my talk, one of the main challenges is there's not much money at all. Oh, I should probably mention, feel free to ask questions along the way. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but if there's something that comes to mind you'd like to ask about, feel free to raise your hand. That would be fine. So one of the Paul.
Okay. Yes. One observation that I'd like to get your feedback on. It seems to me that the seminaries are interdenominational, and the missions are interdenominational. Is that trend common in this area?
When you refer to seminaries being interdenominational, what are you referring to?
Well, you said the seminary was Pentecostal, but it brings in these other people.
Yeah, there are a number of churches and denominations that support the seminary. That nice new building you saw was largely AOG, Assemblies of God money. NPC's been supporting it. And the founder of the seminary is Pentecostal, or the leader of the seminary for the past several decades has been Pentecostal. But there's the situation, I think probably this is probably the best way to respond to your question. The Protestants in Croatia, so Croatia has a population, I think it's of about 8 or 9 million, and the Protestants are about they're about maybe 4 or 5%. So that's a small number of people. And so among those Protestants are Pentecostals and Baptists primarily. And so the seminary serves those. It serves people from those denominations. It also serves people from the Reformed, which is to say the Presbyterian, if you could say that, part of Hungary. So the Reformed Church in Hungary sends people there, and the Pentecostal and Baptist churches in Romania send people there. So is it interdenominational? Well, yeah. It's Baptist and mostly Baptist and Pentecostal, but that's all that's there, basically. And it tries to, the seminary is pretty broadly evangelical in its what it teaches. It's not. It doesn't really focus on doctrines of particular denominations. I mean, you can get people to talk to you about that, but it is pretty broad in its outreach. One of the challenges that the seminary has is that it was pretty much a single light of Protestant education in Eastern Europe since the 1970s. But since the fall of communism, there have been some other churches, other denominations that have set up seminaries. So there's a Baptist seminary, a small one in Zagreb. There is an important Baptist school in Romania. The school has competition, which in a sense is good, in a sense is a challenge, and denominations have set up schools in some of these other countries as it's possible to do that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, Howard?
This may be anticipating the next thing, but you've got Roma on that, and of course Adriatic and Italy. Those are original Indian gypsies.
Yeah, right.
Is that what this church is?
Roger that.
That's incredible, because you would go to a train station, and there'd be a woman there suckling her child, in the middle begging.
Yep.
So I guess you got the right target. You're really following Jesus. This is great.
Well, we try to follow Jesus as best we can. Was there another question?
You
yes, sir.
4 to 5% Protestant. What are the other major?
Oh, Catholic.
Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Poland. It's like 95% Catholic. There's some Muslims there as well, but it's like 95% Catholic. So Roma. So this is this is an interesting opportunity. I've never preached at a Roma church before, and you guys know that Roma is the European word for gypsies. This church has a really interesting provenance. There are two women that were sort of in the leadership, two Western European women who were sort of providing the infrastructure for it. I mean, they had a pastor there who was Roma, but this church outside Osijek was originally a missionary effort of Christians from Hong Kong. So for 5 or 6 years ago, so these Chinese Christians from Hong Kong helped these Roma establish a church. And the Chinese needed to go do something else. Their client was elsewhere, so they found some people. These two women, one is British, the other one's Croatian, to help provide the infrastructure for the church. So it is pretty much a hybrid. So it was a delight to be able to talk to these people. This is the church in the Sunday school class. Jim and I doing a sermon. They have a pretty good music program, and one of the leaders, probably the main leader of this program, is a Roma student from Serbia that NPC supports through a scholarship at the seminary. So we'll see his picture a bit later. He's a fine man of God, a good musician, and he's really helpful for this church. So we had a chance to talk with some of the people afterwards, and I talked with a guy. He and his family had immigrated from Germany, so this discussion was all in German, and he wanted to make the distinction that this is a Roma community; they're not gypsies. I'm not sure that we in America would really make much of a distinction, but I think what this guy was saying, that gypsies like roam around a lot and are transient people, but this is like a stable Roma community not far from Osijek. So he was proud of that. So that, okay, well, great. Howard?
When you encounter them in northern Italy, they're totally destitute, or at least have a pretense to be totally destitute. They're beggars. How are these people so northern?
Small retail, agriculture. This is an agricultural part of Croatia. So they were, the congregation. They weren't. I mean, they weren't. Let's see how to put this. The socioeconomic level was low, but they weren't destitute. They had homes, little homes, and were farming and subsistence agriculture.
They're not leaving the trucks and
No. No, they have little homes, wood or whatever. Some of the homes we would call shacks, but they were a stable community, and they weren't transient. They were there. They're there, and they're staying there. So when we were there in 2011, we met a guy, a seminary student, who was a really interesting fellow. Elvis, his name is Elvis Zofic. Elvis is an interesting fellow. He was orphaned about when he was in his teenage years. And he lived in Sarajevo, so he had a let's think about it. It was a Serbian father and a Bosnian, we used to say Muslim mother. But he's a strong Christian, and he was doing well in his studies, but he was running short of money. So some people at NPC decided to help him with the rest of his academic work. So he's a real activist in the Christian community now in Osijek, and his fiancée is this woman here. She is the daughter of the head of the Baptist denomination in Croatia, and really she's really where she did her graduate work in marketing in Ireland, and is a great translator and a delightful person. So this couple, I think, is going to be do really good work for the Lord in the coming years. So Jim and I talked there at the invitation of Elvis, and one sort of cute little coincidence is that they had the leader of the Baptist World Alliance there, and the Baptist World Alliance headquarters is in Falls Church, like about 10 minutes from my house, and it's across the parking lot from Jim's daughter's doctor. So we got to say hi to basically a neighbor there in Osijek. Pastor Thomas Mogus, this is the son of that pastor I talked to you about earlier. Has a church in Alacha, not far from Osijek, and the Serbian border, and he has a home there. I mean, it's a building, not a home, that they have been using for kindergarten ministry for young people. I mean, really young people, and he's looking for people who might want to come and be part of summer ministries there to help in the community. His community is largely Catholic, so that's been a challenge for him in his ministry because they're not really fond of Protestants, at least the rural Catholics aren't, and so that's been a challenge over the years. So here's Jim and myself with some of the students here at the school. While we were there with the chairman of the board of the school, he's an Italian pastor from Boston, was there to celebrate his birthday. So he had a delegation. This is Peter on the far left. A delegation of students from Gordon Conwell. These are pastors and such. They're doing a special program in the Balkans. But Sam Bombara, the guy in the middle there, it was his birthday, so they had a celebration for him. So it was a good opportunity to meet Sam, or rather not to meet him, but to see him again. So one of the other things that we had the chance to do was to go to Belgrade. Because of the Serbian connections of the school, there's a close ties with a guy named Samuel Petrovsky. Samuel leads what is the equivalent of InterVarsity at the University of Belgrade. So all these people are connected, and so when we were there in 2011, we had the opportunity to visit Samuel in Belgrade and to see some of the people that he has connections with and with whom he has ministry activities. So Samuel invited us to talk, and so when I was over there this past summer, I was talking on ethics at the university, an economics school at Belgrade. So this is us. This is Samuel on this upper picture on the far right, and Jim on the left, and then Vladimir Marinkovic, who is a member of Parliament, but also the deputy director for this graduate school of entrepreneurship and security economics. So I was talking about ethics there. It's the same course I was offering this January for the interim time. So it was really interesting to talk to these students about ethics, because corruption is a main problem in the Balkans. I recall when I was at the airport and coming into Zagreb, I was asking a young man. He was helping me with my car, so I always enjoyed the opportunity to talk with people about their life and where they're living. And so I said, well, so how do you feel about the level of corruption? Is it getting better? And he goes, it's the Balkans. Like that's some sort of explanation, you know. But this is common. It's a huge problem that they have there. So we had the opportunity to visit for a couple of days with some of the university students that Samuel reaches out to. We had together at dinner there in the upper photograph, in Samuel's IVF or EUS office there at the bottom. Oh, by the way, this is Elvis back here. Elvis drove us over to Belgrade to visit with Samuel. So it was interesting to talk about with some of the students there about what led them to Jesus, what led them to a close relationship with Jesus, what it was like to grow up in a Serbian Orthodox family. Like you don't talk about religion hardly at all. So like one of the women that we were visiting with said when she started feeling God calling her to a close relationship. You know, it was hard to talk with her parents about that because, first of all, they don't really like to talk about religion. Secondly, they're not really inclined to give any time to Protestantism. So she was getting excited about following Jesus, but getting sort of negative vibes from the family. So this is a typical sort of ministry experience in that part of the world. And Samuel, bless his heart, he's doing a good job to work within that community. Yeah.
What's the religion? I mean, what's the
religion? Serbian Orthodox. Okay. It's a Serbian version of the Russian Orthodox Church, basically. Yeah.
Oh, there's an interesting thing in the paper this week. is that the Orthodox are sitting down with the Western Church for the first time since 10/10/54.
Yeah. I saw that, and it's good to see. So we'll see what happens. You know, when things happen at a formal level, if anybody sort of guess what will happen as a consequence of that at lower levels, but it's nice to see these people, you know, getting connected to one another, and it's a good thing. So it's glad to see that in the news. So one of the sort of partners NPC has in its work in the Balkans is UPC, University Presbyterian Church in Seattle. We also sort of partner in a sense with Vienna. Vienna Presbyterian supports Samuel and his ministry. But so there were when we traveled in 2010. There were two people from UPC that went with us. So we have a connection. We have a very strong Balkan committee there at that church. So there's a guy, Keith Klein, who's from Vancouver, as a good friend of those people. So so we invited, you know, as we normally do, we invite UBC people to come with us. And so that there weren't any of those folks that could go with us this time. But they told Kevin, and Kevin said, I have a ministry to provide copies of the Jesus film to mission teams wherever they're going here or there. So can I give you a bunch of copies? I said, well, sure. And then let me make sure that they're needed. So I checked over with our friends over there in Bosnia, checked with their friends in Croatia, Bosnia, and Serbia. They said, oh, sure, no, we could really use those. So Keith, bless his heart, provided us copies that had subtitles in Serbian, Croatian, seeing how some of the Roma languages and Bosniak. So it was very nice to be able for him to do that. So we're in the picture there on the left. We're giving a stack of Serbian ones to Samuel, and here on the bottom, Jim and I are giving a stack to the guy that is the head of the church of the Pentecostal church that's located on the grounds of the seminary. Okay, so one of the other things that I did while I was there was sort of check up, on the Shaw Grant connection. So, you know, John Shaw, who was and wife Dorothy, who were members of our church for many years, gave a very sizable donation, about $1.5 million, to seminary education in the U.S. and overseas. And one of the schools that's gotten a grant is ETS. So the grant has been used for several things. One of those things is for scholarships. So here on the left, I'm with Sasha and Luba, or Luba for short. Sasha is the guy that I refer to as the Roma fellow from Serbia. He's a good musician and helps lead this Roma church, helps lead the music for the Roma church. And Luba is Serbian, and his sort of bio really shortly is that he got mixed up in drug trafficking and that sort of stuff, and went to prison, and in a rehab center because it was run by a bunch of Christians. He met Jesus, and he's really on fire for the Lord, and looks forward to continuing his seminary studies. We can go back and do a prison ministry in Serbia. And then the two guys on the left, the two guys on the right. The guy on the left is Cyriakis Abosi from Nigeria, and the guy on the right is a Romanian fellow. It's interesting. The Romanian, this guy from Romania is interested in the theology of reaching out to orphans. So he's actually writing a book on the theology of an outreach to orphans, which he's publishing in Romanian, which is really good because they have a problem there throughout Eastern Europe. And it was good to have a chance to meet him. Ovidio was finishing his graduate work, so we're not supporting him anymore, but we were glad to have the opportunity to do that over the past year or two through the Shaw Grant. So one of the other things that the Shaw Grant made possible was distance education, and so I mean these are not very exciting pictures, but for us they are. So there's a server over there that the NPC money bought that enables students who are at a distance from the school to go to the filed the video files of the classes and catch up on classes that they missed, or maybe even take full courses. The screen sort of cuts off this screen cuts off the classroom screen. So there's a camera here that will be photographing or videotaping the teacher, and then this screen also has the index for the various classes. Now what they do. Any class that requires regular sort of participation, like English language, they don't do that by video, but they will do the basic seminary classes. And a reason that this is particularly important is because there's really no such thing, virtually no such thing as a full-time pastor. Most pastors have jobs, regular secular jobs, and are doing a church either part-time or sometimes even as a volunteer. And so those people can't leave their jobs to go to seminary. So having distance education, which this makes possible, helps them to get their seminary education to learn more about Jesus and God's Word. And the internet penetration in Croatia is high enough that the transmission rate for video signals like YouTube and that sort of stuff works fine for most of Croatia. Okay, so that's Peter. Peter was leading this troop from Gordon Conwell through, so we didn't get to see Peter until nearly the end, but it's always good to see him. Peter has been a respected scholar in Old Testament theology, but also during the time of the war was a real advocate for reconciliation and for outreach, without respect to ethnic boundaries, and this provided the school a fair amount of street cred during the Balkan War, and also because, if you'll remember the map, because Osijek is on the far eastern part of Croatia, there are a lot of refugees that have been coming through there, since last summer, and so Samuel and some other friends we know in ministry there were reaching out to those refugees who were staying in tents. Near the main squares in Belgrade, and as the Serbian and Croatian government were putting them on trains and sending them into Europe, they had an active outreach to those people, helping them with their physical circumstances. And although because these people were transiting Serbia and Croatia, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to talk about about Jesus. But sometimes when they were there for a while, like I said, waiting for other family members to join up, there were such an opportunity. And I was talking with both Samuel and another ministry friend from Croatia with the prayer breakfast. So I was with them at dinner earlier this week. And I said, we talked to these Muslim folks from Iraq and from Syria, Afghanistan. And they say, so you all are so nice to us, and you're Christians. This is amazing. Our Muslim friends don't treat us this way. So it's a great outreach. So that being said, what I want to do for the remaining time for Q&A is to share with you some thoughts about reconciliation. This is a sort of an ongoing sort of driving interest for us at National, and for anybody who cares about the Balkans. You can trace the problem back to the difference between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, which Howard mentioned goes back at least to the end of the first millennium, if not farther back, and then with the Ottoman invasion that came to Poland and to Austria. There's a lot of Turkish people that settled in former Croatia. Settled in Bosnia. So there's that Muslim dimension. So there are the three main religious groups there in the small part of the world. And then Yugoslavia was sort of cobbled together after World War I to the kingdom of the Serbs, kingdom of the South Slavs, Serbs and Croats, Serbs and Slovenes and such. And the Serbs during that time, the 1930s, were sort of domineered over that area. And then World War II, the Croat side with the Nazis. And so there was that problem in the communist world. So there's been a lot of ethnic challenges over the years. So So the war came and went, and there was not a reconciliation effort in Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia, like, for example, there was at the end of apartheid in South Africa, or after the end of the genocide, or after the genocide in Rwanda. And so those of us who care about this sort of wonder about the need for reconciliation and if it's still possible there. We always are concerned for reconciliation, and the seminarians are too. They go out and talk about this, and the need for forgiveness and getting past ethnic hatreds, getting past the situation where the parents will teach their children, you know, that those nasty people in that other ethnic group sort of thing. So in the past has propagated itself, and is it possible to stop that? So we run into some interesting comments. I'll share some of these thoughts with you, because as we give thought ourselves, you know, like to these comments that Jesus offers in the Beatitudes. What does it mean to be a peacemaker? What does it mean to be pure in heart? What does it mean to seek after righteousness? So these are front and center questions when we talk about reconciliation and working in the Balkans. So let me share with you a few key issues and some key questions sort of tied to this. So when I talk with my secular friends, people I know that are academics and do research in Bosnia and Croatia, they say, well, you know, we talk to these NGOs and people, young people, and they don't want to do reconciliation. They say, well, you know, that's 20 years ago. Who needs that? We want to go into the future. We don't want to dredge up the past. And so we want to do stuff that's really current. We don't want to get involved in the problems of our parents. And Peter and other people that know the Balkans really well said, this is crazy. You know, the more you don't deal with ethnic tensions and hatreds and this sort of stuff, the more you sort of build a context, build the germ of a possible ethnic conflict down the road. So that you really need to do this, but the question is how. Okay, so economics is a particularly important issue, because many people say that the main thing that the Balkans needs, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, is not reconciliation but economics, and that it's not really possible. You Christians, it's not really possible to talk about reconciliation if you're trying to put food on the table for your family. So you've got to meet economic needs first and deal with spiritual things later. I don't know necessarily I agree with that, but that's regularly what our secular friends tell us. And you know, economics is important. You know, well, we can talk about this a bit later, but it's important. But how important it is regularly related to the relation to the spiritual aspects is a good question. Croatia has joined as associate member of the EU. Serbia is on the track for it, and Bosnia is due for candidate status about 2017. Serbia is making progress in that because it's been willing to deal with the Kosovo situation. You know, one of the characteristics, or one of the criteria rather, for EU membership is you can't have an ongoing territorial dispute in your country. So the Serbs are trying to resolve that and not by recognizing sort of slowly but surely Kosovo. So it's getting closer to the EU, and so many people say that the momentum, slowly but sure, towards the EU is helping the issue of reconciliation, or helping people to live together, because it brings them more in economic contact. So nationalism. One of the problems that reconciliation has in the Balkans is that the political leaders still appeal to nationalistic sentiment for their political election, for their elections, and for their political support. So, you know, this is not good for reconciliation. And like, so when they celebrate like important war situations or events like Srebrenica or maybe this or that battle, there's been a tendency over these past 15 or 20 years for these politicians to say, you know, we want to honor our war dead, and those nasty people that did it to us, you know, never again. Well, yeah, we understand the never again part, but how much attention do you want to bring to this ethnic disagreement we had with these other people? But most politicians still appeal to that. They're getting better. The Serbia leader is current leader of Serbia has been more open to this sort of thing, and there's been fewer nationalistic leaders in Croatia. But the guy that leads Srpska, the sort of Serbian splinter group in Bosnia, is a really strong nationalist, and it's just part of the regular problem. Lack of trust of political leaders.
On the ethnic and nationalism front, how much has the impact of Syrian refugees played into any of this stuff? Because they're obviously coming up through Croatia and Slovenia and all that.
You know, that's a good question. So let me answer the question two ways.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure, thanks. Right. So the question is, how has the refugee stream from Syria and the Middle East affected the ethnic tensions and any more cooperation in Serbia and Croatia? Is that basically it? Yeah. So, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago, some of my good friends who are Croatian involved in ministry there are working together with Samuel and his students at Belgrade to deal with refugees, the ones that are coming into Serbia, sort of more about this later, but Samuel has offered churches, including ours, the opportunity to work with him in southern Serbia. There's a refugee stream also that comes up through Greece and Macedonia. Okay, so the Croatians and Serbians are working together with the refugee situation coming into Serbia and going across from eastern Croatia into western Croatia and up into Europe. So that's been helpful. But the refugee, so the second thing, the refugee cooperation effort is not big enough yet for it to really affect these long-standing tensions between the groups, whether we're talking Bosnia, Croatia, or Serbia. So the other thing I could say is that hasn't really affected much of these tensions thus far. It has the potential to do that. Just like if people, say a UN or some NGO were to take over an idea of a business or some sort of cooperative effort that would involve people from those different countries working together, that same sort of cooperative activity would also be helpful. The refugee stream has provided some opportunities for cooperation, but it hasn't had a strong enough impact yet to affect the ethnic tensions there. Plus the fact that this is a huge problem, and it's sort of hard. It's a bit of a challenge to try to deal with one problem when you're working with another huge problem at the same time, but just a little side note. Yes?
Aren't they just passing through? They're not staying,
right.
So it might not really affect the
right. That comment, the comment was that because these populations are transient, they may not affect the ethnic tensions. Yeah, the fact that they're transient probably will have the effect that you mentioned. Say not having a negative effect, but you know, when I talked about the economic situation in general, the fact that these countries, Croatia and Serbia, and some of these other ones like Montenegro and Macedonia, have economic problems of their own, but then dealing with these refugees makes their economic problems worse. So that sort of makes the overall economic challenge different. So the partisan press, much of the media is still tied to political parties there in Croatia. I was talking with a guy who has a ministry, the prayer breakfast, a guy who has a ministry to Croatian members of parliament, and I said, so what do you think would be the most important thing that we could do for you as a country? He said, help us establish an independent press. Okay, well, that's an interesting point. So I mentioned the lack of Howard.
On the 28th of June 1914, Gabriel Princip was assassinated compared to the whole of Austria-Hungary. Now this is what is missing now. This is the opening of hope. Because 1914, this was the battleground of Europe with the Serbs, with the Russians behind them, and the Austrians, the Germans behind them, and everything else. That stuff is gone now. So the question that comes to me, which I haven't picked up in the talk yet, where are they heading? If they're heading to anywhere where they can get hope, it's going north to Germany or Sweden. Was that what, is that, do I have it right?
The refugees? Or the
One would assume that the people moving across these areas are heading to Germany and Sweden, where the jobs at least were in the fall.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they're not jobs in Croatia and Serbia.
Now, why doesn't somebody approach federal Germany and say, can you establish some mission? Are there German missions down in this part of the world? There certainly were in 1914.
Yeah, I think that, excuse me, German Christians are reaching out to them. In fact, I know some of my friends in Germany are, and actually we have some friends from Poland that are reaching out to refugees that are in Poland too. So yeah, reaching out to the refugees where they stay is certainly an important task, an important desirable goal. So I think that Christians in Western Europe should take the opportunity to do that. So key questions: is it too late, and how important is it anyway? So as I mentioned, these comments from my secular friends who do their research and say few people want to talk about reconciliation. It's 20 years ago. The young people don't want to talk about it because they see themselves as not being involved in their in the war of their parents, but still they may not have warm feelings about the other ethnic group. Some people say it remains very important to do this. These are mostly Christians that say this, and the second, as I mentioned, the second people think it isn't so critical. So what's the role of Jesus? So when we have major ethnic problems with lots of killing going on, whether we talk about South Africa or Rwanda, I think most evangelicals or most Christians would probably say that there's not going to be any real healing without Jesus being involved. Okay, and I agree with that. It certainly makes if it happens at all, it's going to happen faster if Jesus is part of it. When people are willing to surrender their lives to Jesus. But we know as Christians we are a minority. So what kind of reconciliation can you expect at a broader level? I'm not sure. When I talk with there's a lady that we work with there at the seminary who is a psychologist, and so we asked her about this, and she says, well, the principles of Jesus of forgiveness and loving your fellow human being are principles that are worthwhile to pursue with people, even if they're not Christians. So you can pursue the principles of Jesus because they're still valid, even if the people that we're talking about are not Christians. So my sense is that you have some degree of reconciliation without Jesus, but certainly Jesus is an important part of it. But I'll leave that question to you. That's an important question to think about. And then, what are the appropriate expectations for a secular world? Well, I sort of just mentioned that in my comments a moment or so ago. As we as NPC and as individual Christians think about what we can do in the Balkans, how do you promote reconciliation? How much time do you spend promoting reconciliation? How do you do it? That sort of thing is an ongoing issue for us. Is because we're trying to be peacemakers, like Jesus said. We're trying to look for truth. We all know that rarely is there justice without truth. So if there's any kind of reconciliation, it usually involves a conversation with people sort of sharing their stories, what they perceive as truth at least. So when we think about, as we go over there, and as we support the school here, what does it mean to seek after truth, and what does it mean to be a peacemaker? Okay, so I'm going to stop here, and here are questions. I'd be happy to have comments, questions, observations. Feel free. Yes, sir.
They come at the greatest questions. I live in Virginia. It was illegal to be a Presbyterian in Virginia until 1755 or so. And how that got busted was that the Quakers in Philadelphia got together with what was happening down here. People were being killed and their log cabins demolished. This is Virginia.
Okay, so what's the connection to this?
The connection to this is dealing with a church that is struggling, and the way what's popping out here is that Christians are getting together across the Atlantic Ocean, and you and I have been doing this between ourselves with some other people for a couple of years. And I think the past gives the vision of the future. How do you break this stuff down? How do you break it down? And we even talked about TISA in World War II. During World War II, Croatia was run by a Catholic priest from the Third Reich. If you got that kind of a history, you've got a burden of history that's almost unbelievable. But also our history tells us what solves the problem for the Presbyterians in Virginia. You get together between Pennsylvania and Virginia across denominations. That's already going on.
Yeah, this interdenominational stuff is important, and you know it shows up in one of the sort of advantages is that it shows people that if folks of different denominations can work together, you know maybe the rest of the society can work together too. So would be a long process, but people like Samuel and Peter and some other folks we know, just sharing God's love and encouraging people to love one another and to try to get past and to not think ill of one another and to get past what has been decades of ethnic animosity that they've gotten from their parents. That sort of challenge remains important, and that's what you just have to keep pushing at it, in a general Christian, gracious sort of way. But you need to change their attitudes about this, or help them to change their attitudes, and so continuing to be present there, to encourage people to try to get past their hatred and to think about why they feel this way about other people is pretty key. So, thanks, Karen. I appreciate the comment. Yes, ma'am.
How are you getting the word out there? I mean, is it mostly like sermons on Sundays, or what? How are you disseminating?
How do they do it, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the seminary trains pastors, and so they are these pastors serve in churches, and the seminary students also organize these sort of trips every so often to visit villages, for example, where they're not churches, because there's a significant problem of villages that don't have the funds or such to have a church. So encouraging to visiting and talking about Jesus in that sort of situation. Like I mentioned, our friend Samuel, who has a sort of InterVarsity-like ministry in Belgrade. Those sort of activities are also important. And then I haven't mentioned this, but there's an organization called Renewing Our Minds that some friends of ours in Croatia have organized that since the late 1990s has been a forum in the summertime for young people to come and in the context of learning about Jesus to talk about their ethnic differences. So they're in Croatia, Serbians, Bosnians, Armenians, Azerbaijanis who come to this. So it's one little point of light to help share God's word and help people to deal with these sorts of things. I suppose the Catholic Church talks about this too, but because Croatia is so large, so much large percentage Catholic, it's also the case that nationalist politicians will be Catholics, and some Catholics may not talk much about this. Like is the case, as is the case in Russia. The Catholic Church in Croatia and the Serbian Church in Serbian Orthodox Church in Serbia are really closely tied to the government. So, it's sometimes not easy for the pastors of those denominations to say things that might go against what the government's doing. So some of them do this, but some of them don't. And so I don't want to sell the Catholic Church short by saying they don't do this, but that's another sort of way for them to do it. So a lot of it's individual, ministry, people who are Christians as individuals talking to their friends, that sort of stuff.
Okay, I think we have
there.
time, unfortunately.
Right.
I'd love to hear more about this. Howard, clearly you have so much knowledge of this whole area,
very complicated history, and it's amazing. Again, I appreciate your coming and sharing a little bit of this with us.